went like this. There was once a man who owned a farm in a valley, and at the bottom of the valley, there was a river. It was crystal clear, and it was warm, and it was perfect for swimming. And along the river bank, there were majestic oak trees that were perfect for climbing. And there were fields of green grass, and they were perfect for playing in. And on both sides of the valley was a vineyard. Now, this vineyard didn't just produce any grapes, it produced M&S grapes, okay? These were perfectly sweet and juicy and crisp, no pips. They were the absolute business. And one day, the owner of the farm said to the farmers, he gathered them all together, and he said to them, he says, look, I'm going away for a while. Will you look after the farm for me? You can swim in the river, you can climb the trees, you can play in the grass, just look after the vineyard. And the owner kind of packs his bag, and off he goes, and he leaves the farmers to it, to look after the farm for him. And a few months later, when the grapes are ready to eat, the owner decides he'd like to have some grapes to eat. But he's still far away, so he gets a servant to go and get the grapes for him. He gets servant number 1. I wonder, can I have a volunteer to be servant number 1? Yes, you in the yellow. Do you want to come up and be servant number 1? To the farm with his basket. Now, I bet you those farmers, they are only too happy to give servant number 1 some grapes. I mean, just think about it. He's given them a river to swim in, and trees to climb, and a field to play in, and grapes to look after. He's there we go. Oh, now look, what they've done. What they do is they give him a bop on the head. Okay? There we go. Servant 1, you can stand over there. Thank you very much. Okay? They give him a bop on the head, and they tell him to get lost. Now, I wonder, maybe the servant didn't explain things properly to the farmer. Yeah? Maybe that's why they just gave him a bop on the head. Let's find out because the owner, he is still desperate for grapes. So he calls servant number 2. Yes, servant number 2. Now, the thing you need to know about servant number 2 is he helps the owner with big jobs. Okay? Jobs that really matter. And surely servant number 2, he is going to be the one who can sort things out with the farmers and get the grapes. What do you think? As servant 2 approaches the farm, how are the farmers going to treat them? Will they accept him or reject him? Vote now. What do you think? Reject him. Right. There we go. Okay. Can you believe it? They reject him. And servant 2 has been treated even worse than servant 1, okay? He's been slapped in the face and humiliated. There we go. Okay? Tell the owner he can get stuffed. That's what the farmers say. Well, the owner is very patient, and he really wants some of those grapes, so he calls servant number 3. You can see where this is going. Servant number 3, why don't you come up? Now, the thing you need to know about servant number 3 is really, really good, okay? The owner only uses servant number 3 for, like, the most important bits of business. The really kind of tricky things where you need good diplomatic skills. And I think if anyone can persuade the farmers to hand over grapes, servant number 3. What do you think? Will the farmers accept servant number 3, give them the grapes, or reject? What do we think? Accept or reject? Okay. This time, farmers get violent. Okay. Just. Okay. Okay. Oh, I haven't even given you your signs. Servant 2, there you go. Servant 3. Not just a bop on the head, not just humiliation. Servant 3, they attack with weapons. Servant 1, rejected by the farmers. Servant 2, rejected by the farmers. Servant 3, rejected by the farmers. Are you clear? Because I am. The farmers do not want anything to do with the servants or with the owner. So what will the owner do? Will he give up? No, he doesn't. Good. In fact, he says, I will send my son. And you should know that this owner only has one son. And the owner and his son, they couldn't be closer. They couldn't be closer. They play football together. They eat ice cream together. They watch films together. And they love the same things. They love climbing up mountains. They love cooking pancakes. The owner loves his son with the biggest and deepest and longest of loves. They are so close, it's almost as if they are one. So the owner says, just one last try with the farmers. With my son, surely it will be different. With my son, surely they will listen to him. So I wonder, is there a volunteer to be the son? Yes, why didn't you come up, Titus? So here is the son. This is the owner's last and best effort to fix things with the farmers. And I want you to picture the son coming down the road to the farm, riding on a donkey. And how do the farmers respond? I think they'll come to their senses, won't they? Surely they will realise the owner wants to get right with the owner. Surely they'll realise that. Accept or reject? It's a reject. Son, can you lie down on the ground? They took him, they had him flogged, they mocked him and spat on him, and then finally they took him out to a hill outside the vineyard, and they hung him up on a tree and they killed him. He'd given the farmers a beautiful farm. The owner's love had been patient. He'd sent servant after servant after servant. But even generous and patient love must come to an end eventually. And it happened when the farmers killed the owner's son, because not long after that, the owner returned. And it's sad to say, but he killed the terrible farmers. And he gave the land, the river, the trees, the fields, the vineyard, he gave it to some new farmers to enjoy, to swim in, to climb, to play in, to care for. That's the story Jesus told. And in a little bit, we're going to come back and think about what does it actually mean for us. But for now, thank you to volunteers. We're going to stand and we're going to sing.
Let's stand and sing our song. There is in sorrow still my strength to cast.
Have a seat. When Jesus was telling the story I just told you, he was in the temple courts. He was busy teaching the people the good news about God's kingdom and how it changes everything. And the religious leaders, they were saying, look, why should we listen to you? You're a nobody. What authority do you have? And maybe you're here this morning and you're wondering, why should I listen to Jesus? You're wondering, does it matter whether I reject him or accept him? And that's why Jesus told this story, to remind us who Jesus is and why we should listen to him. You see, God, he is like the landowner in the story, yeah? God gave his people the land Israel. It was a beautiful place, flowing with milk and honey. I mean, if you don't like milk and honey, don't let that put you off. The point was, it was the business. And God gave this land to his people, and he said, it's yours to enjoy. And just like the farmer sent servants to the owner sent servants to the farmers, God sent prophets to his people. And prophets, well, their job was just to kind of remind the people to go God's ways and how good they were. And just like the farmers rejected the servants, the religious leaders and the people rejected the prophets. Why should we listen to you? Is what the people said to God's prophets. And they said it again and again and again. And Jesus tells them this story so that they can see that the man standing in front of them is not just another prophet. He isn't just another teacher to ignore. Jesus wants them to see that he is God's Son who has come from heaven. Imagine it like this. You go into school tomorrow morning, okay, just getting your books out, and the teacher says, put your books away, lessons are cancelled, someone from Buckingham Palace is coming in. And you think, lessons are cancelled, that sounds good. Buckingham Palace, yes please, the royal family. And you're sitting there and you're waiting, and then the door opens, and in comes, a lady you don't recognise. And she's come to talk to you about the king. She's from Buckingham Palace, but it turns out she's a painter from Buckingham Palace. All she does is paint the walls, and she's never met the king. You're a bit let down. But how would it be different if instead of the painter coming through the door, Prince William came through the door? The prince in your classroom talking to you. You know it'll be all over the news later on. He's there to tell you about his father, the king. Just see how that's different. The prince is totally different to the painter. Yeah? One is sort of okay. I mean, it's still important. After all, the painter knows more about the king than you do. But the prince, the king's son, come from his father to tell you all about the king. And so you sit there and you listen. You listen to the prince. Jesus isn't just another messenger from God. He's God's son. He's come from the Father in heaven. And so we listen. Now, Prince William and King Charles's relationship, possibly not that close, but things couldn't be more different between God the Father and God the Son. Yeah? They haven't just loved each other for 3 years. They haven't just loved each other for, 5 years. Or 50 years, haven't got the fingers. They have loved us and loved each other for infinite numbers of years. And they've loved each other with a huge love. Like a million love. A billion love. What's the biggest number? They've loved each other with an infinite amount of love. And it means that they are so close, it's as if they're one. Father and Son. So when God the Father sent his Son, Jesus, to us, he's basically sending himself. This is how a man called John Flavel described it. He said, in parting with his Son, God parted with his own heart. Because what is a child but a piece of parent wrapped up in another skin? And yet our dearest children are but as strangers to us in comparison with the unspeakable dearness that was between the Father and his Son, Jesus. So why should we listen to Jesus? Because he is the dearly loved Son who has come from his Father to tell us all about him. And Jesus' story makes it very clear. We can't say we accept God, but then reject Jesus. We can't say that. That's what the religious leaders were saying. They were like, oh yeah, I believe in God. Yep, love God. Oh, but we're not interested in Jesus. Oh no. If we reject Jesus, we're rejecting God. And the story that Jesus tells, it ends with a very serious warning, doesn't it? That if we choose to reject Jesus, God will one day reject us. It's a serious warning. But as we finish, I want you to notice one thing, okay? And you just get your service sheet open here. Boys and girls, make sure you can have a look at it. Now, you might think this is a really geeky point. Hang on. It's good, okay? The story Jesus tells is all in the past tense. Up until the point when the farmers kill the son, in verse 15. It's all did. And then, for the last bit, Jesus changes tense. So the last bit is told in the future tense. Verse 15, what then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and kill those terrible servants and give the vineyard to others. Now, I know grammar is really boring, okay? But here is the point for us all. When Jesus finishes telling the story, the owner hasn't yet come back. He is still on his way, which means for us, there is still time. So however we've treated Jesus in the past, there is still time. There is still time now, today, to stop rejecting Jesus, to start accepting him. And here's the thing. Whatever your past, whoever you are, Jesus couldn't be more ready to accept you. Are you listening, boys and girls? He could not be more ready to accept you and love you. There was once an elderly man who was taking a train journey, and he notices a young fellow sitting next to him on the train journey, and this guy looks pretty sad, distracted, and they start talking. Turns out this young man is an ex-convict. In fact, he's been released from prison that morning, okay? And his whole life, which has been really messy, has cast a shadow over his family. His crimes have embarrassed them. They've brought shame on the family. And this convict, well, he's practically lost touch with his whole family. But he tells the old man, he tells them, he's come up with a plan, okay, to find out how his family feel about them. So he's written them a letter, and he's explained to them that he's going to be on this train, that will go past their house at this particular time. And if the family is ready to accept him and forgive him, what they need to do is hang a white ribbon on the tree at the bottom of their garden that the train goes past. And if they hang the white ribbon, that'll show that they've forgiven him and they want him back. But if it wasn't hanging there, he would just keep on going on the train and you'd never see them again. Well, as the train approaches the town where the convict kind of grew up, he starts getting more and more tense, and eventually he can't handle it anymore. So he just says to the old man, he says, look, can we just swap seats? I just don't want to look. I just can't bear it. So they kind of swap seats, and he says to the old man, please will you just look out and tell me, is there a bow on the tree? And in a minute, the train comes round the bend, and the tree comes into sight. And the old man, his eyes just fill with tears. And he puts a hand out on the convict's knee, and he says in a trembling whisper, he says, it's okay. And the convict, he turns round to look, and the tree is just covered in white ribbons, from top to bottom. They want him back. So whatever your story, wherever you're from, listen to Jesus. He's the Son. He's come from the Father, and he is ready to accept you and forgive you. And you'd be crazy to reject him. Let me pray. There is no other name in earth or heaven found. Father, we thank you that Jesus is brilliant, that he's your Son, that you love him, that you've sent him to us. Help us to listen to him. Help us to accept him today and forevermore. Amen.
Thanks very much, Ian. Isn't it amazing that Jesus told that parable, told that story,